This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan
Schawbel.
Welcome to Five Questions, Sophia.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Really happy to see you here and connect with you, especially during these interesting times. Even though you wanted to play for your school's volleyball team, you were required to do theater growing up.
Yeah.
How did your experience on stage make you realize that you were meant to be an actress?
Oh, I don't know if it was the immediate experience. I went to a school where we had arts requirements every semester of middle school. So 4 requirements in 7th and 8th grade, 2 every year. And I put theater off until the end because one of my best friends is a sort of quintessential theater kid and I wasn't. And I thought, well, that's her thing. And maybe if I put it off until spring semester, I won't have to do it since I'm going to play volleyball. And the school laughed and called my bluff and made me do a play anyway. And probably a good thing since I never topped 5'6". I was never destined to be an Olympic volleyball player. But I think that the years that followed, subsequently doing so many plays and getting so involved in essentially books come to life, storytelling, the catharsis of what happens in a theater, really slowly led me to realize that that's where my passions really ignited. English was always my favorite subject, and yet I thought I was supposed to go to med school and be a good first generation kid and be a doctor or be a lawyer. And I realized that I wanted to try something else, and I'm very, very thankful that my school called my bluff that year.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I didn't even think my career was possible. I mean, there was no podcasting. There was nothing really mapped out for me early on. I wanted to get an MBA and work at Procter and Gamble. And I am not an MBA, and I have never worked at Procter and Gamble. So it's pretty remarkable how things can unfold, and it kind of pushed you in a new direction.
Sorry, I cut you off. I'm really, really curious. How did this unfold for you? How did you wind up hosting a podcast and being a journalist on your own terms?
Yeah, great question. So it was 3.5 years working at a big technology company. And then this was 2006, 2007. So very early in days into social media. And I was blogging. I wrote 10 to 12 articles per week to pretty much no audience to start. And then I just kept building and building and building. And then I started to pitch different smaller business and trade magazines. And then I built that and built that and built that. And then I eventually launched a company after I created the first social media position at my current company, the big company. And then that kind of catapulted me to being able to write a book called Me 2.0. And then things kind of spiraled from there. I started my own company, started write for Business Week. In the early days, I was the youngest columnist and and then I wrote for Time. And at the same time, I was building my platforms, and eventually I launched a podcast. But now it's been about 2,500 one-on-one interviews.
Wow.
So it's been a very, very long journey. The podcast medium has been it's been new, though. It's only been a few years, but it's been built over. There's always a longer backstory. Everyone likes to see the outcomes, but there's such a journey. It's every single decisions made every single day, some good, some bad, and then they accumulate and put you where you are today. And I think that you can probably relate to that. And not only have you been able to follow your passion and see this new side of yourself, even in childhood, to be an actress, but you've gravitated towards fashion and you've gravitated to entrepreneurship as well. So you're also seeing now new sides of yourself. And as the co-founder of the luxury fashion company, Fashionkind, when did you originally connect with the co-founder, and how do you both complement each other?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. I was trying to remember when Nina and I were first introduced. So I actually had to sleuth through my own Instagram, and I realized it was earlier than I thought. It was actually 2017. And we met because a friend of mine went to business school with her and just said, listen, this woman wants to change fashion and its global impact. It's a huge polluter industry. Nobody really talks about that. Fashion is also so intertwined with not only my career, because I have to get into character by figuring out how a person dresses. I can represent something with clothing. There's the whole world of, borrowing really cool clothes for award shows and things. And then it goes even farther back, because up until he retired at 70 years old, my father was a fashion photographer. So for me, there's also the sort of lifelong admiration for the art of it and the artisanship, and to know that there are human beings whose hands touched the things that we wear, and that, a blouse like this is engineered. It's a small piece of architecture, essentially. So I have such respect for fashion, and also the world of fast fashion is really kind of destroying the planet. Fashion accounts for between 4 and 8% of all carbon emissions on Earth. And I have no idea how to be a person who needs to use it for my work, but also wants to change it. I just was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm one person. How does this work? And I was introduced to Nina Farron, and she said, I'm starting this company called Fashionkind. The reality is that if you want to create change in markets, you have to create change at the upper echelons. You're never going to start something in streetwear that's going to affect luxury, but if you can change luxury, you can change streetwear. And I was like, okay. And she started showing me all the data that proves this, brilliant business school mind of hers. And we started really getting crafty on what that could look like. And I've been working behind the scenes with her for 2.5 years. And we were going to announce our partnership last March, but COVID hit, and we thought this is a completely inappropriate time to be talking about fashion. But the interesting thing is that we've been able to track trends in what people are buying and how their shopping is changing through this year of working from home. And we're really, really excited about just entering some new ideas and data points into the conversation around how we consume and what we consume, and what are we being told to consume? Who's making money? Who are we supporting? Who's being hurt by this industry? And how can we, the consumers, who essentially get to vote with our dollars, how can we move our money out of harm and into investment, into the things that will pass on, into the things that make us feel good, that are good for the planet or good for people? That feels like a really exciting conversation to, play this small part in.
Yeah, I love that. And especially because you're an environmental activist, and you mentioned various stats. Like, I'm a stat person myself, and I believe
Don't
that
you love it?
I'm a data geek. I just
Me
actually,
too.
I released a new study today of 2,000 people. So I'm like, all up in the data, trying to
I just
uncover
love
new
it.
things. It is really great. And it's actually really effective. It's part of the reason why Amazon is so successful. It's whoever
Mhm.
owns the data, you have to get a sense of who your customers are and how, and their human behavior and shopping habits.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really key thing. Did you have that type of education going into this business? And what skills do you think you learned as an actress, or experience that you had that you can bring into this company? And then what do you think from this company you can learn and apply to your career as an actress?
Yeah, I am always studying data. Like you, I love stats. I love percentages. I love information. I love to know what's happening globally, how things are changing, how things are trending. Give me a graph or a pie chart all day, every day. And learning some of the stats in environmental work, and and also in human rights work, understanding how many garment workers around the world are harmed by fast fashion. I thought, okay, there have to be some story points we can connect for people, because most people don't know this stuff. Most people aren't being given this information, and people are busy going to work, providing for their families, living as individuals on this planet. And I really believe that one of the things I'm good at because of my career is storytelling. For me, every stat, every number is a human being. When we look at even the numbers of people that we've lost in this pandemic, they're not numbers, they're people. They left behind families. And when we hear about, in this vertical that we're discussing now, when we hear about the number of garment workers who were killed in a factory in Bangladesh because it collapsed, when we hear about people who've died in fires in these same working environments, we have to remember their humanity. And we have to be able to, not to, feel necessarily guilty or shameful. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad, but we have to know how our purchases, which feel inconsequential, might be affecting those people being harmed. And that's the thing that feels important to me here is I'm a storyteller. I can come in and talk to my partner who is an incredible, MBA mind and say, this is how we have to explain this story to people. They have to see the human being who created this. They have to understand that, this sweater we're selling costs what it costs because it's actually a living wage for a living human. And those things to me feel really important.
Yeah,
And
makes sense.
I have the privilege of this platform, so I get to be a megaphone for issues like this. I get to talk about human rights in terms of fashion, in terms of environmental justice, in terms of equity, all of these things that I get to speak about. When people say to me, you're into so many causes, I always kind of laugh because I think, no, I'm into the planet and all these things are connected. And if I get to make those connections for people as a communicator, then that gives real purpose to my career.
I think it makes sense. And I call myself a data storyteller. And I assume that
Yeah.
you could say the same about yourself, is using data to tell the story, because data gives
Mhm.
the story credibility. And I
Mhm.
think what you've noticed, and what I've noticed from studying, all these different areas in terms of business, is that people want to work for or buy from
Mhm.
brands that have the same values as them. Like,
Exactly.
especially over the past year, it's what is this company doing to, serve the greater good, to
Mhm.
better the community, to take a
Mhm.
political or a social stance on an issue that people care about and that people are fighting for. And
Yes.
since you're, how did you originally get to be an environmental justice advocate, and how does Fashionkind address these issues specifically?
I mean, the environment was really what kicked off all of my social activism in the first place. I grew up in Southern California. My entire life, my best memories have revolved around being outside, experiencing nature. And I was working with an organization called Global Green for years. And then the Deepwater Horizon explosion happened. And before we knew it, millions of gallons of oil were pumping through the Gulf, and the environment was being devastated, and people were being harmed, and corporations were lying about it. And I flew down to Gulf Shores and was on the ground in Louisiana 3 weeks later, and making videos, and literally joined Twitter because of this. Instagram didn't even exist yet. And that has been my entire foray into taking up space in the world of social media. It is taking up space and using my voice so I can advocate for other people. And by no means do I believe I'm an environmental justice expert, but what I am is a person who shows up to learn from environmental justice experts and who counts some of those people among my dearest friends. And I have seen in the data, whether it's from environmental justice experts or human rights experts, the fact that people are affected by the environment, that communities of color are disproportionately harmed by environmental injustice, women and girls are disproportionately harmed by environmental injustice. These things are so important to us to connect and illuminate. And so, in figuring out how to have those conversations about housing justice, about food access as justice, all of these things root back to the environment. Who's living closest to that plant that's making everybody sick? Who is living in a zone of food apartheid and who isn't? Who has access and who doesn't? And we think about fashion as a frivolity very often, as a luxury, but we all wear clothes every single day. Clothing is as essential to human life as sleep. Perhaps not fancy clothing, perhaps not a sequin gown, but you're wearing something on your body every day. And if we can begin to understand that what we wear affects other people, we can begin to make more conscious choices. We can invest in less but better. We can spend our money on something that actually supports an artisan rather than some, nameless, faceless company. And that's been a real joy in the last year. As our COVID response strategy, we put all of this stuff on hold. We didn't talk to the press for a year. We didn't do anything public for a year, but what we did was we launched into a strategy to support all of our artisans in Central and South America, because there were families, and very often women, very often matriarchs, who make these unbelievable garments or handbags or, woven headbands even, whose orders were canceled, who had spent the money on producing these garments, these items ahead of time to deliver on a fashion schedule. And then retailers said, well, we have to close our doors, so we're canceling all of our orders. And we could not allow that to happen because we knew that that would mean financial ruin for these providers of their families. And so we figured out how to create digital trunk shows. We figured out how to launch email newsletters. We figured out how to reach out to people and say, these are the people who need our support. This is the inventory we need to help move. These are the humans behind the thing that you're holding on the other end of receiving mail. And for us, not only is it about brands that work sustainably in their environments, or that harvest materials sustainably, or that dye their materials sustainably, but it's about how do we sustain the human beings who are doing better so that they can continue to do so, and so that they can continue to provide for their families.
That's beautifully said. And I do agree that people want to know how things are made and grown now between fashion and food. And what's great about your story, Sophia, is that it's not random. You're not like, I'm going to jump on this environmental trend and be some hero. No, it's this rich backstory of you always caring about the environment and noticing that a lot of other things are connected to the environment. The environment is kind of like this big umbrella, and a lot of the other societal issues fall under it. So it's really good you know that. And I think part of the reason why a lot of your friends care about the environment and why you're friends with them is because of those shared values. Because you both care about the similar issues at a deep level, you're more likely to form those type of connections because you're going to rally around that. And you even see it today. Seaspiracy, that documentary, it's basically like, if we don't do anything about our oceans, good luck eating fish in the future, right? Like it's just remarkable about all these stories coming out. And I think that that's why what you're doing is so powerful, because we need spokespeople across all the different societal issues that we have to come out and bring the data and bring the storytelling, which is, you can't just bring the data. You got to tell the story, because stories connect with people's hearts.
Well, and one of the things I realized too is, and I'm sure you think about this, we both have the privilege of speaking to a large audience, right? And I think about talking about these issues. And I know that, across social channels, if I post something, not all 5 million or so people across those channels are going to care about the same thing. Not everyone's going to care about the science behind the Blue New Deal, which, by the way, will support ocean restoration. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson has been on my podcast twice. She's absolutely brilliant. And if you don't follow her, you should. She's everything in terms of environmental justice and in terms of ocean health. She has taught me so much about what we can do for the oceans, what we can do in vertical kelp farms, the amount of industry that will be provided and jobs and infrastructure if we really invest in the ocean. And a lot of her climate policy has wound up in, Biden and Harris's administration as they're talking about plans for the future. She's that brilliant. Not everyone's going to care about the data behind vertical kelp farming in the ocean and how we're going to grow oysters and scallops. But some people who care about the environment do care about where their t-shirts come from. And some people who care about the environment do want to invest in a handbag that isn't harming the earth. And I think about the responsibility of being able to talk to that many people. And I just think about myself essentially as like a highlighter. I get to read everything, and then I highlight the most interesting stuff, and I put it out there, and I can see who responds to what. But my goal is to make sure that of all those 5 million or so people that I get to talk to every day, that I inspire everybody about something.
Yeah, I love that. And you're elevating messages and data that would not get the airtime because because a lot of people who are the researchers usually don't have the big platforms.
Right. And a lot of people with big platforms don't love data, but I do. And I'm like, cool, I'm just going to go talk about it all the time to everyone who will listen to me.
Yep. And that's why you're here today. And finally, what is your best piece of career advice?
Oh, gosh. My best piece of career advice. Actually, I was thinking about it as I was sharing my story with you, and then you shared your story with me, the word that came to mind while I was listening to you was flexibility. You and I both, whether we realized it or not, as we were getting into the early stages of our careers, learned to be flexible. We stayed curious, we got creative, and we kind of forged our own roads by responding to what was happening in real time. You know, for each of us, starting a podcast may not seem like a typical thing to do, but we did it because we followed our curiosity. Everybody out there is always like, follow your passion. And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? Passions change, but if you can follow what you're curious about, if you pay attention to what you spend the most of your free time doing, that might lead you into a portion of your career or into a deepening of your career. And also, nobody wants to talk about it these days because everybody just wants to seem like it just happened, because that's like a cool thing to do on Instagram or something. I hate that. You have to work really, really hard. You have to be willing to start at the bottom. You have to be willing to bust your ass and learn. You know, you don't get to start at the top ever, no matter what it is you're doing. And so I think it's that. I think it's having a real work ethic, and I think it's being willing to respond to your curiosity as a clue, which requires flexibility, but will certainly lead you to more interesting places than you might have imagined.
Agree. And the way I think of it is action is the path forward. When in doubt, just start doing things, and you don't know where they're going to lead. Right. And you start on one path, and then, like, let's say you're in a movie set, you meet somebody or someone pays attention to you, and then that leads to something. And then you go to perform something somewhere else. So you join, and be an entrepreneur and co-founder of your company. And through that business partnership, you meet someone else, and you spin it off into another company. You got on a board of a company, or who knows what could happen.
Who knows?
The only way you find out what could happen is if you perform action. I really appreciate this conversation, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.